Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, the reality is, as long as the music lives, the rock and roll dreams never ever die. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, and I'm going to assume that you do because, quite frankly, you're listening right now, please subscribe. Subscribe to the podcast. Give us that old like button, hit the subscribe button, give us the old 5-star rating, basically wherever you get your podcasts. We're at Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, pretty much everywhere. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on the social media, as the kids call it. We're on the Facebook. We're on the Twitter, and we're on the Instagram at, well, where else would we be? We're at In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I say this a lot, but it's true, pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because if we love to write about it and watch it and talk about it, we love it when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please, pay us a visit. On this episode, we got a fun one. We are diving back into a little bit of pop culture, a little bit of rock and roll history from a CanCon angle. We're looking back at the career and life and time of Doug and the Slugs. If you're of a certain age, you definitely know who this band was. And they had a good run, but, you know, at the same time, the rock and roll dream never lasts for everybody, and some people get wrapped up in it, as Doug so sadly did. For those who know that Doug Bennett died prematurely just due to alcohol abuse and other issues, but he was a creative force that lived his dream. And we look at not just the career of the band and sort of the highs and lows, but we see their impact on pop culture, but also how the guys could kind of step away from it when things were kind of petering out, but sort of understanding how the rock and roll dream changes, I suppose is the best way to put it. And we had the unique pleasure of talking with the director, Teresa Alfeld, who takes a POV sort of angle on this because her childhood best friend's dad just happened to be Doug Bennett. And as she dug into it, it became a much more personal story than really expected. But it's a fascinating watch, and it's before it's premiering on the CBC Doc channel this coming Sunday, tonight at the Hot Docs Bloor Cinema, there is going to be a special screening of Doug and the Slugs and Me, and and there's going to be a special Q&A with people afterwards, and go check it out if you want to, because it's a fun doc, but you'll learn a lot too, especially if you are nostalgic for the sounds of yesteryear. But no, but not just that, really. I mean, when you look at it, it has a lot of great subjects, and it's really dealing with sort of the importance and sort of the fragility of the pop culture zeitgeist as well. And we talk with Teresa about all that and so very much more. But like I said, at some point, probably, it's going to be this Sunday, but it'll be rolling out over all the CBC platforms. But check out Doug and the Slugs and Me. If you cannot make it to the Bloor Hot Docs Cinema tonight, go Google Bloor Hot Docs Cinema for more details. But first, enjoy our talk with Teresa Alfeld, because between you and me, it's a pretty good one. Now, I mean, obviously, just to kick it off officially, I mean, just thank you so much for the time today, and then congratulations on the film. I loved it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. It's been a real journey, this project.
Well, that kind of dovetails into my first question. I mean, obviously this is a very personal project for you, but I mean, walk me through, I guess, what kicked it off? What was sort of the impetus to be like, no, maybe I should make a film?
Yeah, so I released my very first feature documentary about 4 years ago with my producer John Bolton, and that story was about a Vancouver era politician, and we ended up licensing all Doug and the Slugs music to make up the soundtrack because we're like, oh, why not? That makes sense. Sure, I had grown up beside Shay and Doug and the family. But I was more thinking about them objectively, like, oh, that would make a good fit. And when we released the film, we were just overjoyed with the reaction that the soundtrack got. People were they're like, yeah, great film about a politician. That's great. But Doug and the Slugs. And so John, my producer, and I thought, oh yeah, you know what? This is an easy film. We can do this. Let's just make a quick rock doc about Doug and the Slugs, because obviously we know there's a lot of interest there and the guys are great. So that was the impetus. I was a very foolish person, a very naive person 4 years ago who thought she could go out and make a documentary about a Vancouver band that she happened to have very deep interpersonal connections to, but somehow leave herself out of it. Yeah, that didn't exactly pan out.
No, I mean, I guess you figured out pretty early on you were going to be part of the story, as in terms of when you were starting to put this together.
No, it was not early on.
Really? Okay.
No, I had no desire to be on camera or to feature my life in the film. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I observe other people and talk about their stories. So I was excited to hopefully benefit from the fact that I had these connections. But in no way did I think that my own story with the family was going to be part of the film. That really happened when I started looking at home movies of the family and having to sort of explain and recontextualize what the process of connecting with the Bennett family was like after about 20 years of not seeing one another. So it started being, there was a point where it became unavoidable that I was going to be a character in the film.
No, I mean, for research on something like this, I mean, is the material just there, or like
Oh,
walk
I
me
think
through
you
sort of the
froze.
process of having to sort of dig through everything?
This project was actually a dream. It
Really?
was a dream because Doug Bennett kept everything. So when he was, at the peak of his success, obviously he had management and label support in compiling relevant media articles, so on and so forth, as they were going. So at the time of Doug's death, he had a massive archive in his widow's storage space. This included original tapes for some of the Doug and the Slugs tracks. It included master tapes for the music videos, as well as 35 mil that they shot making it work on. It was like, very rarely in a documentary filmmaker's experience do you actually walk into one of these situations where it's like someone's done the work for you and you have the absolute joy of getting to go through a box labeled photos and see all these unseen shots of the band on the road. That was really the first part, was just sort of what Doug had left us. And then things changed really significantly when Nancy, his widow, decided she was comfortable sharing Doug's journals with me. That was something that had also survived. That was 39, you'll see them in the film, 39 notebooks that Doug had been using to chronicle his story as he was building the band for about 10 years. So it sort of started, in terms of the archival, it started with a basic, wow, we have all the photos, the music, the videos in an archive, get at her. And then, it started getting a little bit more personal, getting my hands on the journals, getting my hands on the home movies, asking my mom what home movies she had of the Bennett family. It sort of just had a bit of a blossoming effect that way, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. But I mean, it leads into my next question, because I mean, I'm curious, was everyone on board for participating? I mean, particularly when it evolved from just straight rock doc to something a little bit more personal.
Yeah. I mean, it was a delicate situation, and it wasn't just, when you're making a film with other partners, the way John and I were, this is a CBC Documentary Channel Commission. Lots of people have viewpoints of how they want to see the film go. And obviously it's my job to stay true to the story that I want to tell. When I realized it was shifting, it was delicate. conversations with the cast and crew as it was happening, namely because in documentary film, you try a lot of things and you never know if they're going to work out anyways until you're in the edit, so okay, Shay, maybe let's go to the old bowling alley. Sure, it's more specific to you and I to film your interview, and we're going to talk a little bit more about us as opposed to just Doug and Slugs. How does that sound, right? So there's never a moment in making a film where you say, you know what, we're changing gears. This is a personal POV film. Everyone will now get a press release or an update email, and we're going that way. You start kind of trying things out.
Right.
And then you get back in the studio, you watch, you think, oh, wow, that was the right way to go. Let's build on this.
I love how the film really managed to balance sort of the pop culture impact and sort of the state of the music industry, especially sort of in the early 80s when the guys were getting started, alongside sort of the emotions of the guys as well, and just sort of how they were feeling and what they were going through at the time. But I mean, I'm kind of curious, how do you parse something like this down? Because I mean, even in watching this, I could have imagined you could have made a 90-minute film just talking with Denise Donlon.
And I would like to let the record show, funders out there, I want to make Denise Donlon's film. But in all seriousness, it's a huge kudos to my editor, Hart Snyder. We knew going into this, once he was on board, this was going to be a complex film. There was a number of different storylines, and we had to be very, this is not an artsy word, but strategic and intentional with how we crafted the film, and create a framework that would help guide us to what got into the film and what didn't. We did lots of mapping, lots of writing together in order to find that balance. And again, Hart played a huge role in figuring out how exactly do we tell the story of Doug and the Slugs and me.
No, I mean, I love that you had Ed the Sock, because honestly, I mean, just inherently with Doug and the Slugs, there is a nature of comedy to the music as well. And I mean, you couldn't necessarily have it all be sort of these academic scholars or experts talking about music at the time. There needed to be a little bit of wit there. How important was it for you to sort of make sure that there was still humor in telling the story?
Hugely. One of my barometers that I used when I was making the film was, what would Doug think of this? And what would the band think of this? We didn't want a straight rock doc with talking heads telling the rise and fall and here's everyone now, because that doesn't reflect the energy of the band. That prompted me to reach out to people like Ed the Sock, who encapsulate that wacky DIY out of the box personality and perspective, in order to really make a film that matched the Doug and the Slugs crazy energy. So yeah, it was huge.
Now, I mean, in seeing the story, it was just amazing to see how the guys and the Slugs could eventually back away and sort of make peace with it. But Doug had to kind of ride it until the wheels fell off. I mean, quite literally, unfortunately. But I mean, when making this, like, was it difficult to sort of see that perspective of why he couldn't necessarily let go where the other guys could?
It was brutal to watch. From, I'm making the film almost 20 years after he died. And again, he's not just a documentary subject to me. He was a big part of my own life, but I'm now getting perspective and information about him as an adult that I never had as a child. It's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. Especially in the journals, when I'm reading the decisions that he's grappling with in order to live his dream and have the type of career that he wants to have, with the other pieces that he's balancing. Especially now that I'm a similar age to Doug in the journals, those things really hit home. But to look at his life, the later part of his life, and know that he was really suffering, and so many people wanted to help him. Unfortunately, there was so much more stigma about addiction at the time, in a way that I think really made it difficult for him to accept help. Yeah, having to tell that story and look at that part of his chapter was really, really sad, and the worst part of making this film.
But at the same time, it must be a joy too to sort of have the film, I mean, spoiler alert, sort of have it end on a bit of a celebratory tone. and just to see sort of the spirit of it move on. How important was it for you to not just capture Doug and the Slugs as what was, but as what they still are and still are going to be?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, I don't like, and I don't typically make, here's the story of so and so. They did this, it happened, let's move on. I mean, this was really looking at what's going on in the present right now. And the beauty of time means that, as you mentioned, the guys, number one, have perspective on their success with Doug and the Slugs. Had I tried to interview them in 1989, it would have been a much bitchier film.
Right.
but they have a lot of perspective, and they're able to recognize this incredible thing they built. And not only that, they're able to continue to bring it to audiences. And they're doing, Doug and the Slugs they're performing to this day. They put on a great show. And that was something that was really important to show, that in many ways, one of the big themes of the film that I hope you picked up on, I'm sure you did, is friendship.
Yeah,
And these guys have made it as far as they did because of relying on one another and supporting on one another. And that's carried them into their 70s, that they're still making the music they wrote and they love and performing it with audiences. So that was pivotal to me, to not leave on a sadder note from the past.
Well, and I mean, I love that too, because not necessarily all rock documentaries allow for that or have that. But I mean, I'm kind of curious, and this is a silly question, but it's one I always like to ask. Can you think back to the younger days? Like, was there a movie or a moment in your life that made you want to be a filmmaker, that made you want to be a storyteller?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. There was many. I was a very obnoxious, creative only child. And I glommed onto books and movies right away, and knew right always that that's where I wanted to work. Some of my earliest influences were Buffy the Vampire Slayer as a
Love
kid.
it.
I mean,
Love
when I found out that there could be a young woman who was holding the world on her shoulders in secret and had to kill and could kill all the bad guys on her own, my world was rocked. And I realized I understood the power of television and film at that point, and I've tried not to look back since.
No, and I mean, I love that answer, because I mean, Doug and the Slugs almost kind of fits there, because it's one of those things where it's not the answer that's going to be right away, but they have this real pocket of sort of pop culture importance and sort of significance. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, as the film gets out into the world. Good luck with the screening tomorrow, by the way, and just getting it out on the Doc channel this weekend. But what do you hope sort of people pull away from the legacy of Doug and the Slugs?
I often describe Doug and the Slugs as a somewhat misunderstood band. They're very known for their big hits. We all know Making It Work. We all know Too Bad. And again, those are wonderful tracks. But what I've come to learn is that the band were far more sophisticated in terms of their songwriting, in terms of Doug's lyrics, than you can kind of get from those big hits, and even from their very over the top music videos. You asked her earlier about research. One of the first things I did was I sat down with their 6 LPs and listened to them front to back on vinyl several times. This was before the band's music was available online, obviously. But when you really do a deep listen, you get to hear all these shades to the band's personality, different instrumentation, different use of genres and styles, weird phrasing that Doug would try out. They were really, again, complex. And there's a lot of darkness and depth. And not only that, they worked their asses off. They succeeded in an era where you didn't just release a song on Spotify or SoundCloud, right, and suddenly you have 5,000 followers and you're booked for a show. These guys put in the work. They were the original road warriors. They honed their craft over playing over and over and over again, no matter the audience. And they came up with a dynamic stage show that has been forgotten because, again, that doesn't live on record. And a really, really interesting and complicated and funny and moving collection of music. So I hope that after people see this film, first and foremost, they have a new appreciation for Doug and the Slugs, what they achieved, and the art that they made. And beyond that, I hope they are feeling, thinking about important relationships in their lives, maybe thinking a little bit about how grief has touched them, and hopefully
Yeah.
finding something healing in this film. And most importantly, telling all their friends to go see it tomorrow at the Hot Dog Cinema in Toronto, before our release on CBC Doc Channel and other CBC channels, which we'll be announcing soon.
And you're right. I mean, this is really such a story of friendship. And I mean, I love that you brought up digging back into the music, because after I watched the film last night, I actually went into the music as well, and I was listening, and I'm like,
Oh, there you go.
damn, this some really good stuff here. And if anything, these guys should be remembered, if for anything else, for having a music video set in a fish gutting factory, because I think that's just goddamn epic.
Isn't it? Isn't
Yeah.
it? And it was operating when they shot that video. They did not buy out the factory. They literally, I don't know how they got permission. I doubt they did. They just got in there. You can see Doug is wearing his Walkman. That's
Right.
his playback. That Walkman is playback. Well, they like a guerrilla video in a fish packing plant. Like, that is so Doug and the Slugs.
That is
Ew.
wild, and I love it. But you know what, Teresa, thank you so much for the time today. And again, congratulations on the film. It's a hell of a piece of work.
Oh, thank you so much, Dave. So good to chat with you. And
For sure.
yeah, hope folks make it out tomorrow, October 8th, 9 p.m. at Hot Dog Cinema.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.